Does not. There we go. My name is Carrie. I am part of our adult programming team here at the library, and I just want to thank you all for coming this evening. I have a few housekeeping matters to go through before we get started, and then I'll turn it over to the good stuff. So first of all, this is an after hours event. So as of right now, the library is closed. So after this event, we're going to ask that everybody exit through these doors and go out the Clinton Street exit. You're probably not parked on the street just due to the construction back there, the paving. So I'm sorry if you have a walk. I can be a bodyguard. There are also restrooms right through those doors. So feel free if you need to use a restroom, step out. Heads up, this event is being live streamed. So right now, if there's anybody watching, hello. And then I just wanted to highlight a few upcoming events that we have here at the library. We're really excited about some of these. There are little pieces of paper over there. They're quarter sheets, so feel free to stop by on your way out. So tomorrow night, or excuse me, Thursday, we have Families in Politics, a Braver Angels program. So that's just working through how to talk to your family about, or how to be with your family and talk about politics, which is never an easy conversation. On Halloween, we actually have Dark Corners of Michigan History with Tobin Buck. He has been here before, so he's going to talk about some of the creepy places that we have here in Michigan. And then on November 4th, we're really excited about this one. We are doing Zero Proof Your Holidays. It's a non-alcoholic drink celebration. We'll have live music and hors d'oeuvre stations. So we have the mixologists coming from Adam Merkel Restaurants, and they're going to walk us through how to create 3 specialized mocktails for the holidays. So definitely encourage anybody that's interested to sign up as soon as possible. It does require registration, and we don't want you to miss out on that. And then finally, keeping in the topic of tonight, we actually have on Thursday, November 9th, we have One Veteran's Journey with Adam Smitty, who is a local veteran. And he's going to be walking through his own personal story. So just a really great way to get some insight into some of the experiences that he personally had. That's all I have for me, and I want to turn it over to Ellen, and she's going to give us some background of the League of Women Voters.
Thank you. Thank you, Carrie. Excuse me. Thank you all for coming tonight. And I want to take a moment to thank the Howell Carnegie Library, especially Carrie, for hosting tonight and putting this up live. And we will share that recording afterwards and put it on our Facebook page, website, and so forth. Great information. And if you'd like more information about the League, just go to our website. You can sign up for our emails or sign up on the back table back there, and we'll get that information out to you. If you're looking for ways to assist in the electoral process, please sign up to be a poll worker. We are strongly encouraging folks to get trained, get paid, and help support Livingston County community to provide safe and secure elections. It's going to be a busy year next year, 2024, and with this expanded voting windows, we need more folks to help out at the polls, so please consider that. Speaking of elections, our recordings for the candidate forums for the Brighton City Council, as well as the Howell City Council races and mayoral race for Howell, are on our website, so please look that up and learn about those candidates. Be smart when you vote. Finally, we have one more upcoming event on Wednesday, November 29th at 7 p.m. right here in the Meabon room. We are going to talk about the improved voting rights in place under Prop 2 of 2022. We're going to have our Howell City Clerk, Deanna Robson, on hand to answer all your questions. And the goal of this town hall is to provide you with information you need to understand your new voting rights. So please join us. We're always pleased to host another educational forum for our community. And the Leagues of Michigan's public position on healthcare really aligns with veteran services in this county. And that is to provide a basic level that includes preventative care, health promotion and education, access to cost information, primary health services, acute, long-term care, mental health coverage, and services, including substance abuse services. So that's the League's position. And I can't imagine, but veteran services is not much different than that. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn it over to Lori, who's going to introduce our speaker tonight.
Thank you. It is my pleasure to introduce Ramon Baca, the Director of the Livingston County Veteran Services. Ramon has served in the U.S. Army for 25 years at various stations as an infantryman from 1996 to 2022, right? He served in many leadership positions from fire team leader to command sergeant major. Ramon was twice deployed to Iraq and twice deployed to Afghanistan with the 101st Airborne Division and the 4th Infantry Division. While he was at Fort Campbell in Kentucky, Ramon met a woman from Howell. She also served with the 101st and was also deployed to Afghanistan. She is now his wife, and she, along with their 2 children, they live here in Howell. They've chosen to spend their time here. Thank you very much, Ramon, for coming to speak to us. It's all yours.
How's that? Everybody hear me? All right, good. All right, thanks for the introduction. Thanks for having me. A beautiful facility here at Carnegie. I actually bring my children here quite a few times. I'm actually going to bring them here this weekend. My son has to do some reading, 200-page novels now. He's 4th grader, go figure. And so I have to bring him here because I think in the house we have maybe 50-page novels. That's about the max that I can read. So I said, well, let me take it down to the library. As illustrated, I was an infantryman, so I didn't dig too deep in the books. Instead, I liked being out in the field instead. But in time, I guess we all got it in. As mentioned, I'm a transplant here to the beautiful state of Michigan and Howell specifically. I met my wife back in 2009 for the first time. Coming to Howell was that Christmas time, 09, to meet parents. So that was a little nerve-wracking. And to this day, I'm not even sure that they have even warmed up to me yet. But so I'm moving to your hometown, so we'll make that happen. I'm kidding. We get along great. And yeah, my children one goes to Southwest Elementary, right across the street, and then the other is now at Parker Middle School. So we're moving up in the world, getting a little bit older. It's hard to believe. Remember the first day when my daughter was going into kindergarten. So now they're just growing quickly. But that's kind of in a nutshell why I'm here. We thought it was logical to raise family in this town, Livingston County, generally speaking, not just Howell, but this whole area is just wonderful. It's beautiful. Wish I would have grown up in something like this town, such tight-knit community and all the resources that are available. It's absolutely amazing. As luck would have it, I'm now a civil servant after leaving the Army, serving for all those years in uniform. Kind of entertained, well, do I go back, work for the government? There's not really a post around here where there's a lot of GS positions or things of that nature, like a Fort Campbell or Fort Bragg or anything like that, places I've been stationed, Fort Carson, places like that. So, it never really dawned on me that I'd end up back into a civil service type environment. So I started working as a project manager down in Novi, got hired down there and worked there for around 4 months. It was very short. I actually felt extremely bad about talking to, at the time, my boss about leaving to come work here. Look what happened, my wife stumbled on the position that was open for director down at Livingston County Veteran Services. And she said, hey, this might be right up the alley. I said, what are you talking about? I read it, and the job posting said, that's perfect. And so, it allows me to continue to serve in some form or fashion, and still talk the same lingo, same language, the veterans, folks that were wearing boots just like I was. And I feel like I've got that connection to all eras. I think you just generally do that brotherhood, sisterhood, whether I was Army, like I said, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, all of the above, whether they were officer enlisted, Vietnam, World War II, all the way fast forward, Iraq, Afghanistan. And so we just had that special bond and that connection. And so I was just grateful to stumble on the position and even more grateful to get hired. So now I think you're stuck with me for the next 20 years or so until I start another chapter thereafter. So we'll see how that goes. But A couple questions that were asked of me, and by all means, please be interactive if there's anything that I come across or that I mention and you want to ask questions, please do. A couple questions that Lori asked me to address, and I'll go into this in a moment, but the VA services that we provide, I've got a lengthy list of things that we do. How are we funded? How do veterans access the services? And I'll start here actually on bullet point 4 and 5. So what are the greatest needs in Livingston County and what needs go unmet? I'll start out there. I feel like that's probably the toughest question or issue based on this list. I feel like I can get through the other things fairly quickly. And I talked to a lot of the staff as I was approaching this today, and I said, you know, what do we think? What do we see needs? Part of our services, and I'll get deeper into this, is emergency relief. And so many times we'll have folks come to us with eviction notices and you know, behind on mortgage or rent, things of that nature. And so I feel like just countywide, generally speaking, things that needs to go unmet, probably low income housing. I feel like we're in a very great community, very blessed to be here, but it's expensive as far as what I'm encountering with some folks and some of the struggles that they have. And so I'll explain more about the emergency relief side and how we help if we can help. But largely when it comes to eviction and things of that nature, that's so far gone from our reach that there's not much that we can do about it, unfortunately. We do turn them on into organizations such as OLSA and things of that nature. But I stumble on that quite a bit. I would say once a month or so. And I've been there for around 18 months, going on 18 months. So we do get these cases from time to time. What improvements would I like to see happen? Well, and I was talking earlier before this began, as far as improvements for my department, I can honestly say there's no greater improvements that we can do as far as facilities or as far as headcount. Luckily, I walked into a beautiful facility. My predecessor was able to move us to the facility we're at now, which is next to the Secretary of State off of Grand River, if you're familiar with that, next to the Coles, that's the other landmark. And so perfect location. Everybody has to go to the Secretary of State, renew a driver's license or a plate. I mean, I guess you could do it online, but tend to have to go to the office at some point. And so they walk by us all the time and say, oh, well, I'm a veteran, or I know a veteran, and I just didn't know what you guys did. And you know, so we give them a tour. We talk about these services that we do and stuff like that. So as far as the location is concerned, it's phenomenal. As far as the building, it's beautiful. Obviously, like I said, I've been in the Army for so long, worked out of various locations, posts, and buildings, and for a government office, it's top notch. I mean, I even have a desk that raises up and down and stuff like that. I mean, it's amazing. And so as far as infrastructure is concerned, for us, for my department, headcount is adequate with what we have. There's 10,000 veterans via the last census from all areas. So 10,000 veterans in our county, and we're about par with the rest of the counties across Michigan, 83, I think, counties total. And really, you look across the U.S., it's also about average with your residents, total residents. And so, with that said, my head count goes like this. So I've got myself, I've got an admin specialist that primarily works the front desk, answers phone calls, checks people in as they come for appointments and what have you. I also have an office manager who kind of runs all my fiscal things as far as when I have to submit reports to my committee, again, the Board of Commissioners and folks like that. But then also helps with the front desk intake and stuff like that. I got 4 veteran service officers. And so really that's where the meat and potatoes come in, and I'll talk more about that. And so as far as, and then my lastly, and shouldn't ever forget about these guys, my transportation, these guys are out there on the roads daily. So I've got 3 drivers, 3 vans that take people to and from. So as far as, and I'll go into that in a moment, my department. My head count's great. So no problems with head count, no problems with infrastructure, anything like that. So that's, like I said, that was probably the toughest question as far as improvements I'd like to see happen regarding our facility department. Was that within the nature of the question, or should I expand more to any other entities or anything like that? All right, I'll go into what VA services that we provide. So like I said, it's a pretty good laundry list of things. I'll start with my transportation, so I ended that a moment ago. What we do is we'll take any veteran and or their spouse to any medical appointment. It used to be where we were only able to take them to only the VA hospital down in Ann Arbor, for example. But since we were able to get a third van, and I was actually able to hire a full-time driver, before it was just two part-timers. Actually, historically, they used to be volunteers. And then a couple predecessors ago decided, well, let's pay these gentlemen for their time, and they got it approved. And so now, I have the two part-timers as I walked in, and then we were able to get the full-timer on board. So it helps because now we can expand that service to a 50-mile radius from around my office. I say 50 miles, maybe 52, 55, but we keep it at that 50-mile radius, so all the way down to Detroit, Southfield, Flint, South Lyon. I mean, you name it, we've probably been all over the map. And we'll take them to any medical. What we'll do is we'll actually ask them to even reserve a ride up to 30 days out. Because what we don't want is the day prior, everybody's calling in, wants a ride tomorrow, and suddenly we don't have any. And we know that appointments can actually be scheduled up to 6 months, but we don't want to go that far calendar year. So our sister department, LETS, I'm sure you're all familiar with LETS, phenomenal department over there, all the transportation that they do throughout the county, and they take people to all kinds of things, right? Pay your bills, go grocery shopping, clothes shopping, whatever, maybe appointments also, things of that nature. So what we do is we partner with them, they dispatch. So what folks will do is they'll call into their number, and they will ask for a ride, and they'll say, I'm a veteran, and I need to go to whatever said medical appointment, whether it's dental, medical, physical therapy, anything like that. And they say, okay, perfect, veteran. Then they pull up my driver specifically, John, Tom, and Tony, and then they'll say, okay, what day, time, and they have this phenomenal system that just pieces them in. It's like a Tetris game. They put them in, and they basically rack up all the rides so that it's the most efficient thing I've ever seen. You'll go pick up veterans, sometimes two, take them and go to and from, drop them, maybe go get another one, drop them off, and then go back for the other. And so veterans do not, and again, their spouses do not wait ever really for more than, definitely not an hour, and rarely it's 10 or 15 minutes to wait. Because normally then sometimes if it's like so far out, like Ann Arbor, for example, my guys will just wait on it. So it's not, now there's some dialysis patients and stuff like that they'll go for about 3 hours or so. Those they will definitely drop off, go pick up some more people, deliver them, and then go back for the other person. So that's kind of how they work. So they're busy. They're all day on the road, and they work between the hours of 8 and 5, even as early as 7. They'll come pick up because sometimes the appointments are earlier. So that's our transportation service. Again, it is widely used. Have a little lull right now, so please help spread the word that it's for medical, veteran, and spouses. Spouse wants to go with a veteran, they just need to call and say, hey, it's veteran plus one. Just make sure that they know that, so we make sure we have them see you. So right now we're kind of slow, so that ride is available. And let's see, I have that number written down. I'll dig that back up for Let's. At the end, I'll give all the phone numbers. So then the other part, I already kind of touched on emergency relief. So by state law, back in like 1899, there was a law that says folks coming off the battlefield kind of came back to homes that were destroyed, farm fields that weren't up and operational anymore. So the state felt like we need to help with emergency relief. So this dates back very many years, right? And so that's actually the reason our office truly exists. That is the sole reason. We've expanded services, but really it's for that. And so what happens is an indigent veteran or the family member, spouse comes and says, hey, we make a certain annual income limit, and it's underneath that threshold. We have an emergency that's unforeseen. We can help them, all right? Doesn't mean we always help them. Doesn't mean sometimes we have to deny folks, okay? Because we do have to be, we have to scrutinize bank statements, because that's the policy. We look at 90 days worth of bank statements. We look at, are you a resident for at least 90 days? Because we don't want is folks just be passing through. And because I'll get into this one in a moment, how are we funded? Well, it's funded by taxpayers' dollars. So the emergency relief fund is your money, my money. I'm a Livingston County resident, pay taxes. And so we have to ensure we're being good stewards of the fund. So we do look at, okay, what are you looking for? Is it unforeseen? And is it more of a one-time thing? Or is it, we're going to pay this bill and you're going to come back next month to pay the same bill and then thereafter, such as like a utility. We can't just pay utilities all year long. It's not unforeseen, right? But let's say, for example, uh, real bad storm came around, tree fell on the house, maybe the roof's leaking, maybe all their money had to go towards the deductible to pay for their roofing costs through their insurance company or something like that. Right? And then suddenly they're like, but now, because I had to pay that money, it's unforeseen, now I can't pay my heating bill coming up in the winter and December timeframe. And, I have no way they're going to shut it off. So that's like an example of unforeseen costs. That's an emergent need. And that's when we tend to step in, help, scrutinize the bank statements, look at it. What happens is my counselors, the veteran service officers, they have a certain threshold that they can approve, but they'll still come and obviously give me the courtesy and say, hey, we have this situation, checked out everything looks great, that's on the situation, they'll approve it, they sign it, and what we do is we actually pay the utility company, or been time where we have to pay overdue rent or something like that to prevent homelessness. We'll pay the landlord themselves, so the company, the business, not the actual person, the applicant. Okay? And then there's times that it's above their threshold. It's up to my decision, and then I look at it and I either approve or deny. Now, if I deny, they always have the right to go ahead and appeal that decision to our committee. And there's also other times where it's above my threshold, and they checked all the blocks with all the paperwork. They have everything that they need. And looks like a clean packet, kind of answered all the questions that we feel we have. Then we'll submit that to the committee, who meets once a month, and it's open to the public once a month, every third Wednesday of the month at 5:30 p.m. at the office. What happens is then they'll look at these packets and they'll scrutinize and they'll look, okay, is there frivolous spending? Is there, was it truly unforeseen? Is this something that, if we help them, are we not going to come back to us again? Because that's the spirit, right? We help them, they don't have to return for that particular reason again. But if it is, it's going to be a continuous thing, then it's prone to get denied, quite frankly. So that's kind of how that works, the emergency relief fund. Is there any questions on any of that? Pretty clear? Yes, ma'am. Right, that's a very good question, and it can. So, what we'll look at is, okay, so like, let's say, did you get injured on the job, that example, are you getting workman's compensation or something of that nature, right? So are funds continuing to come in, or is it just the fact that you got injured and now there's zero funds coming in? So that would definitely put them in a predicament that, now I'm behind. So we'll look at all those sorts of things. To answer your questions, it could fall under the predicament that we could prove that. So we just have to look at, other things such as, in another tangent, however, I've got car repairs I need to make, but really they're retired, for example. They're not even of working age anymore, but they just want to. And so in those cases where they needed to have car repairs, well, car repairs aren't really unforeseen, but really you don't need to get anywhere, i.e. a job or anything like that, because you're getting a pension of some sort coming in. You can deny things like that. I think in your scenario, though, where they still need to maintain car payments, mortgage, things of that nature, in order to prevent homelessness, then that would be a cause for, let's look at that. Let's see, is this going to help them be a step up, or is it just going to prevent them from moving forward? Is that at the committee level? No. Once it goes to the committee level, that's it. They have the authority to really approve or deny, and that's really what we will always do, though, is always seek out other resources. So sometimes it won't fall under our purview for various reasons, but we'll always reach out to other entities across Livingston County and even at the state level, because the state also has like an emergency relief fund, the Veterans Trust. And so in these sorts of cases, we can always help them apply for that. And so our veteran service officers are advocates for that. They'll actually process that application to the state. So if we deny them, and if my committee denies them, we can always go that out. And sometimes they're a little more lenient on some of their things that they approve. The other things we do too is we'll reach out to some of the nonprofits. Veterans Connected is one that helps a lot. Vet Life tends to help on certain things, American Legions, VFWs. So we'll always look for like another solution if one exists. I can honestly say we will never leave somebody just empty-handed with just a no, and that's it. Shut the door and we're done. we're always trying to seek something else. Yes, ma'am. So the names of the gentlemen. So the committee, what it is, by state mandate, 3 to 7 person committee that we have to have. And what happens is essentially, me as the director, that's my next layer of it's like a board, exactly. So what I do is I report to them monthly on all our financials, any of these packets that need to come their way, and overall numbers. That's just as far as, walk-ins, call-ins, appointments, and so on. And then it's just open for discussion, new initiatives. Sometimes we have some great ideas that we want to try out. And so, got to pass it by them and say, hey, is this something that you think we should pursue? Is this something we want to spend money on or not? Or, is there other avenues if there's money involved? Is there other ways to send out a newsletter via the townships versus paying for postage and a postcard or something, right? So these are just discussions we have, some of these meetings. Then next to them, we also, like end of year annual budget, we report to the Board of Commissioners. So here's the county. So it's kind of like those 3 layers. And we don't report to the state at all, nor do we report to federal. We have relationships with some of these entities, but we don't like report. So I think she had her hand up. Yes, ma'am. We're a county organization. So we're actually funded by the millage. So the taxpayers, and actually last November, we were on the ballot, and we were on the ballot for the next, every 6 years. You approve it, and we're good for 6 years. So in 6 years, we'll come back and say, hey, we need X amount of mills. And so what happens is that's what generates the cost of the emergency relief. That's what funds that program. That's what funds, like, pays for our fuel for the transportation that I mentioned that we go to, pays for the maintenance of our vehicles. So they maintain our vehicles. If it's out of their scope, then there's various mechanics around town that they can look at the vehicles and fix them if they cannot, if their mechanic can't. But it kind of tries to stay within house to include fuel. And so that's where that millage money goes. And yes, and salaries, correct. Yeah. Yeah. No, great question. So every year, actually going into this next year, I budgeted for nearly $300,000. About 270, rounding up, but 270, 279 is what we budgeted for. And this year, it was nearly the same from last year to this year. I think we did a 5% increase because of the cost of living and whatnot goes up, but we didn't quite spend that much this year. So what happens is just because I budget for it, it maintains. It just kind of maintains in the fund that will roll over. And then what happens is then I don't have to ask for as much millage next year. So for example, we're approved for 0.1152 off the top of my head, 0.1152 that we're authorized by, that was on the ballot and the taxpayers voted, and they said yes. It was approximately 70% voted yes, to 30% voted no, something like that. So I went over a few hearts and minds. But what happens is we're authorized up to the 0.1152. However, last year going into this calendar year 23, we only opted to ask for half of that. So it was 0.0564, I think was the math. So I'm told me not to do math in public, I shouldn't do that, but it's approximately 0.0564 was this year. Going into next year, we have to up it a little bit. Historically, there was funds that were already rolled over for many years in the past, largely because we were not fully staffed. This is the first complete year we've been completely staffed at 10 people, 10 headcount. So years prior, we lacked a couple full-time positions that were on the FTE. I think they were only authorized like 7 or 8, but now rolling forward, so there was some money left back then that's rolled over time after time. That led us to only ask for the 0.05, what did it say, 24 or something like that, this last year. And then this year is 0.07, I think is what we're asking for. So it's been approved. So that's what will end up coming out. But that's what funds all of the facility, the salaries, because we have to pay for the lights, we have to pay for the gas, we have to pay, the natural gas, and all of that. So that's what keeps us up and running and operational to do what we do. Yes, ma'am. No, they are. They're volunteers. So what happens, they get appointed for a 4-year term. And so through the county. So what happens is the county, um, they posted much like a job opening. It's not a paid position, but it's like a job opening, if you will. So that we'll post it. We'll even put it out in news media and like Press and Argus, WHMI, things of that nature. We'll put it out there so that they can just help advertise it. Hey, these postings, this posting's open. And so they're appointed for every 4 years. And so what happens is they basically put in I call it a resume. It's not so thorough like a job resume. It's kind of, why do I want to be on this committee? What can I bring to this team, sort of thing that they write. And they submit their DD-214. DD-214 is your discharge paperwork. That's what shows that you left the service with an honorable discharge. If you had anything less than honorable, then they won't be allowed to apply for the committee. So then the committee then gets selected by the Board of Commissioners. I don't have a vote in that, actually. So what happens is the committee will look at all these various resumes. They may call me if they have questions, because not all the Board of Commissioners were veterans. 3 of them are. So sometimes they want a clarification on something that's on the discharge paperwork, or whatever terms these guys are using or gals are using on their summaries. So anyway, they can ask me some questions, but I'm a voting member of that. Board of Commissioners will ultimately appoint them, and they're good for 4 years. So actually, I've got 2 gentlemen that are coming up at the end of 24. They're kind of all sporadic. Like they didn't all get appointed at the same time. Yeah, that's all. Any other questions regarding any of that? Good question. Right off the top of my head, it was around 279,000. Yeah. Is that what that math is? You're quick. No, they don't. And so again, they've got to meet a certain threshold of income. So for example, in that threshold, you're probably actually wondering what the threshold is. For example, we go off it's almost like a national property level, and it's actually the VA numbers, the Veterans Affairs from the federal system. So one person in the household is approximately 39,000. So if they're anything under 39,000, then they're considered eligible for the program. Anything above that is essentially your over income. Now, there could be circumstances why they're slightly over income. If they're $10,000 over income, then it's not going to get looked at. If it's $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 over income, we could tend to look at it and make an exception. But so again, for one person, one veteran in the household, 30 or widow, 39,000. For 2, let's say it's veteran and spouse, off the top of my head, it's about 42 or 43,000 is what's considered national, like that poverty level line. So that's how we operate. It's not just some number we just made up. Yeah, I'm sure it is. I don't doubt it. Again, that's more of a federal number that we kind of mirrored. So probably sounds like it is. Let's see here. So a couple other services I wanted to mention. So going back to my VSOs, Veteran Service Officer, they're nationally accredited Veteran Service Officers. So what that means is that they have gone to a Veterans Affairs proven course, graduated the course, and have gone a federal background check in order to get a certain ID card to be able to plug into the federal system, federal VA system, U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. And what happens is now they can go into the system and file the paperwork on behalf of the veteran to submit for various things, a lot of things, and I'll just start getting into that now. The easiest one to talk about is everybody's, I'm sure, heard of like VA compensation and or healthcare, right? So what happens is, for example, service member gets injured while they were in service. Jumped out of too many airplanes, their back has arthritis, had knee surgery, something to that effect. And it's documented back in the service time frame that they had surgery, or they just even simply went to what's called sick call, maybe got some Motrin, some medication for it, did some physical therapy. When you have all that documented, it becomes a very easy process. So what happens is the VA forms, my counselors will fill all that out with a veteran. Veteran signs and says, yes, that's my social, that's my birthday, that's my name, my time in service, DD 214 attached, and this is what happened. Like I said, if they jump out of an airplane and broke a leg. Okay, where are those medical documents at? Oh, here they are. Then they're teeing up a software for us. And that just gets put in the system, gets sent off to VA examiners. They look at it. Sometimes they don't have those records. Let's face it, like my generation, I left with my records in hand, but your Vietnam veterans, let's say your World War II veterans, they're not. But they absolutely know what happened to them, and they can tell you, yep, this happened at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, at the Army hospital there. And then what happens is we just write all that down, basically location. The VA can then go dig for those records and find these records. And all they do is say, yeah, I broke my leg. Okay, we write all that down, time, location, done. Now what happens is then those packets will go to the VA, federal VA now, again, the county. It goes to the federal VA. Federal VA then looks at these packets, and they determine if they want an additional examination. A third-party examiner, not at the VA hospitals, believe it or not. So what they'll do is they're contracted doctors that they will go and the veteran will go and say, okay, yep, I'm coming here for said ailment. And then they go and say, okay, what happened? They'll look at range of motion, or if they go for hearing, they'll put them in the hearing booth or something to that effect. And then that doctor will then write their summary, send it back to the VA. Then the VA basically looks at apples and oranges and they say, okay, this is what we pulled from the military, and then this is what this third-party examiner said, and then they make the determination from there. I think what they're looking for is accuracy. They're also looking at how much it's gotten, how much more it's gotten worse. Does that make sense? So like example, your range of motion when you left the military 10 years ago might have been decent, but now it's so far gone that now that's how they rate you accordingly. And now it could have gone from 10% disabled on that particular leg to 20 or 30%. So that's if you've ever heard on the street, oh, this service connected for 30%, 40%, 100%. That's kind of what goes into it. And sometimes you can have multiple. You can have 20 things wrong with you, or you could have one. And sometimes the one thing is so bad that it is 100%, or maybe it's 0%. 0% is actually a good thing in the VA world. What that means is it provides you health care. And so anything 10% and above actually provides a monthly compensation check in the mail. Well, not in the mail anymore, it's electronically deposited, but what happens, that's where your 10% and above. So that's part of what the VSOs will process. We also process burial benefits. So what happens is there's various thresholds of federal VA money that can be reimbursed to a family member who incurred out-of-pocket. And I know that funerals cost on the upwards of $20,000 sometimes, but the VA will actually only reimburse up to around $2,000. Let's face it, I got it, it's a drop in the bucket, but it's something. So it depends on if you're service connected versus not service connected. So it goes anywhere from 2,000 down to around 1,000 or so, depending on the person's ailments, what they died of, and even years of service. So and never tell anybody, oh yeah, you'll be qualified for A, B, or C. You can't do that because every veteran's different. So you just have to get their records, process it to the VA, and quite frankly, we don't have any say on what they do or they don't get. It's processed to the VA, and then they look at the predicament, and then they award it or they do. Goes the same for that compensation, the illnesses and the ailments I mentioned. So that's burial. As far as burial, we can also help them process for the headstone. So if a veteran gets buried in the National Cemetery, they're going to have the one standard headstone. You've probably seen it's 2 or 3 feet high. It's white marble. That's the one standard headstone that goes in the VA cemetery. However, some people prefer to be buried in a private cemetery, and that's okay too. So what happens is a private cemetery may allow that particular headstone, or they may not. May not be able to see this, but there's various sorts of headstones. There's the bronze placards all the way up to the uprights, right? So it just depends on what like the private cemetery will allow. And so these are things that we help folks file. They just have to, they mail it off, and then ultimately the arrangement was made with that cemetery to get, mounted into the ground. Going back to the federal cemeteries, there's like Hawley, for example, there is no cost to be buried there. So the cost is incurred when the funeral services happen. That's really what happens. But once veteran or the dependent, so it could be the spouse can be buried there. It can be minor dependents if they happen to pass as minor children, or it can be adult dependents. So like, son or daughter that are dependent on their parents, and for whatever reason, they can also be buried in that national cemetery. So with all that said, once the national cemetery takes it, there is no cost for opening the ground, for filling the ground back up, for mounting the headstone, for the upkeep thereafter, or any of the above. And then what tends to happen is the VA can help compensate for the travel expense of the deceased to get there. So that tends to be what the reimbursements may be for. Reimbursements can also be for cremation purposes. So family would have all that out front, and then later they go back and say they try to claim those particular things. As long as they are not already being reimbursed by another entity, then the VA can approve that. We also have a county burial reimbursement. So, if they're already claiming it with a VA, they can't claim the same bill with us. Okay? But let's face it, going back to the $20,000 scenario, if the VA gives them back for that particular receipt $2,000, then we can do up to $1,000. Going back to the millage fund, and that is the other part of our funds, by state mandate, every county must give at least $300 for a burial reimbursement if the cost occurred pocket. Okay? Now, when it comes to where they have, it's already been prepaid, for example, or say life insurance or something like that's paying for it, and if the loved ones left behind didn't come out of pocket, well, then there's no reimbursement. Does that make sense? For neither our MD or the VA. So for starters, the state says every county must authorize up to $300. Well, over the years, we've been lucky to get the millage pass and so on and so forth, and we've actually been able to up it to up to 1,000. So it's the 300 initially plus another 700 for up to. Does that make sense? Some of the other, I wanted to touch on this too, highlighted this. National Guard and Reserves can also be buried at Hawley, as an example, if they were retired. I get that a lot, because this is a big Guard state. Because again, we don't have like a Fort Bragg or Fort Campbell near us, right? Fort Drum, some of these other Camp Lejeunes of the world, we don't have those near us. But there's a lot of people out here that have served in the Guard or Reserve. In order to be buried in the National Cemetery, you have to have retired or have served active federal service. For example, a lot of Guard members and reservists were deployed to Iraq, Afghanistan, right? So if they were on deployment orders, active federal service, and they served their time honorably, and they left that period of time when they were supposed to, in other words, not for disciplinary reasons, then they could also be eligible. So that's when your Guard members, your reserve members are. So really on the simple fact that he was active federal service, because then he was called to Title 10. So Title 32 is your state stuff. Title 10 is active federal service. So in other words, he got deployment orders and went to Kuwait or Afghanistan. So with that in a nutshell is no, not necessarily his entire 6 years Guard or reserve. But so what I wanted to offer this is there's a form that we can help fill out and submit. You don't have to really write this down if you wanted to, but VA form 40-1007. This is an eligibility form. So for this scenario alone is why we often say, fill out this form, as you send it to the VA can then look at your record and tell you if you're eligible. Because I don't want to assume that, well, yeah, he went to Afghanistan. I would assume that he was Title 10, active federal service, but then they can look at his service record and say, oh, yes, you qualify, or you don't. Because a lot of them, the Guard members will get called to state service, right? That's largely why they exist, for state emergencies and whatnot. That in itself doesn't count. So like the Detroit riots, for example. So again, that's why I never tell somebody you're not qualified or you are qualified. in scenarios like that, it's best for them to ask the VA in the fall, am I eligible? Now, if you serve active duty, then that's almost a no-brainer. Active duty is going to get you in post 1980 several times, 24 months for other benefits, not necessarily the burial. All right. What else do I want to touch on? So yeah, we help request for the markers, certificates. You can get a certificate in honor of your service signed by the President of the United States. And you can actually ask for as many certificates as you want. The other thing we do at the county is we actually give the flag boxes. So the loved ones can go back to, like, the funeral homes are really good about requesting the flags, but then you can also go request it through the U.S. Postal Service. And I was actually just in Howell the other day, and I asked them, I said, hey, how many flags do you generally have on hand? They said, usually we have about 60 on hand. So you literally just go fill out the form, show them the DD-214, the discharge document, and then you can get the flag for your loved one there. But then what we do is we also have, enough money to be able to purchase some of these flag boxes. We give those free. So what happens is they come in to claim their burial expenses, and then at that time, we can also give them a burial box for the flag. We don't give the flag, Postal Service does, but we'll give the flag. All right. Any questions on any of that? So, yes, ma'am. So it's got to be served for 90, I will say 90 days active duty. That's not based on out of pocket expense. Yep. Yeah, out of pocket expenses, right? And had to serve at least 90 days. And in our case, 90 days county resident, because since every county offers that, like let's say they just moved here for whatever reason, from a sister county, Washington, let's say, they tend to have to go back there. So, I mean, we'll hash that on. 90 days, Livingston County resident, 90 days of active service. And okay, yes, sir. Right. 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 That's a great question. So right. So if you're enrolled at the VA healthcare system, they give you the ID card. I think that's what you're discussing is the ID card, because you mentioned medical, right? So VA healthcare system will give you the ID card. And then you can also get your veterans designation on your state driver's license. So Secretary of State, once, if you're due for renewal, they just show them the DD-214 discharge and they'll put it on there for free. No, that's Secretary of State. Yes, sir. And then the VA ID card is you have to enroll in the VA. Multiple ways to get there. So one way I've already discussed is you had knee surgery, you get, connected for that. That gets you in the VA healthcare system. And at Arbor, they will give you that ID card. Another couple of ways I wanted to discuss is, so you can also get in the VA healthcare system with income, lack thereof, really. So lower income threshold, right? So veterans, so let's say they didn't have any ailments that they can claim, right? But they are a lower income. They actually look for they ask you all your assets and all that stuff on the form, and you file that, then they can tend to approve you for VA health. So that's another way to get in. And then lastly, certain eras of combat veterans, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, can also get in just based on their service during a time of war. And so again, I kind of used this example earlier. I tend not to tell anyone whether you do or you don't qualify for VA healthcare, because VA has their system of how they track people and how they look at different eras and income, and then they determine if you're eligible. What happens is, going back to that knee surgery, you can forever go to the VA absolutely for free for that particular ailment. There's no charge for, it needs bothering you, you need medication or whatever. Probably needs a bad example, but whatever ailment you can think of, you won't get charged for that. Okay. Now, the other way that I just described, if you're in there because of lack of income, low income, they can tend to charge copay. They're very minimal copays to include very minimal prescriptions. So that's another way to get it. And then that's a way to get that ID card. It's kind of, yes, ma'am. So it does. So let's say, for example, you have mental health issues due to time and service. That can actually absolutely be a claim and can be adjudicated and approved for that. Much like the knee surgery I keep using, it can be for mental health. Drug addiction and alcoholism, I'm not going to stand up here and say whether it is or it's not. It all has to be through the VA. They have to determine if your time and service caused that. Now, fast forward, and let's just say that you were into the VA healthcare system because of not necessarily service connection, but let's say because of lack of income. But you need to go seek out mental health or, alcohol treatment. They can still take you. They have the facilities, but they may charge you copay. So it just, again, it just depends on whether service connection means you're not going to pay for that. If you're not service connected, there may be a copay. Does that make sense? Does that help out the scenario? Sure. Sometimes it happens months later. The diagnosis just has to occur at some point, and it has to be able to be traced back to your time of service. So like, for example, and we deal with this all the time now, our large clientele is the Vietnam veterans. There was a large draft back then, and so predominantly speaking, there's a lot of Vietnam veterans out here versus like my area and any other area. Right? So for example, let's say veteran was in Vietnam back then, never claimed PTSD, never thought to even get treated or get seen. Years later now, decades later, they finally decide to open up and file for it. And then the proper diagnosis has been made, they can get connected now. It just has to correlate to their time of service. And that's where those doctors, whether there was already documented or maybe it never was, but now these third-party examiners, that certified doctor listens to the story, writes down the diagnosis, sends it back to the examiners, and they decide, yep, that's service connected. Because most likely something that the trigger that they describe and the time and the occurrence, it all relates back to where they were staged in or where they were at. And so that's where they make that, they connect the dots. Yes, ma'am. No, you're fine. Yeah, no, great question. So these are actually paid for by the VA. So my department doesn't do that. We file the paperwork to the VA. Then the VA decides, I want that veteran to go get seen. The VA, federal VA, they pay for that examination. So the veteran, there's no out-of-pocket for the veteran. So there's the agencies that the VA has already contracted out to. Those agencies call the veteran and then they say, hey, for that particular ailment, they know their various specialties that are around here, normally a 50-mile radius, and they just say, you need to go to this location. But the veteran has a say in that, some of that too. It's obviously the date and time. And then if they say, hey, I can't get this, for example, then they'll look, well, is there anybody in Howell? Is there anybody in Ann Arbor, anywhere closer? They'll work with the veteran to try to get them closer, better day and time. Now, we take folks to those medical appointments all the time. So for example, Southfield, that's a prime thing that we do. They'll call us, say, hey, I need a ride to my appointment for the VA because of that examination. Perfect. That's exactly what we do. So we take them there. So it's got to be the contracted folks that the VA has deemed that they have vetted and contracted versus now going back to the private doctor. That's if they have the diagnosis already, that is perfect to help the submission. So that needs to go with the submission initial. And then that way that VA examiner sees, your original diagnosis, and then now a third-party examiner's diagnosis. So now they have two diagnoses to go off of and to see if, does it make sense? Normally it does. I mean, it should, why does it shouldn't conflict. It really shouldn't, but there's probably been times they have. There's obviously a reason they decided to go there, to go double check what the private doctor submitted. So, yes, ma'am. So that was actually one of the talking points I was going to speak of. I'm glad you brought that up. No, perfect, perfect. So and I know this is super tiny, so I know folks on the camera can't see this, but so what we did here is we basically we pulled the list of presumptives from the VA website. Okay, and it's what we're calling the PACT Act. Everybody's familiar with the PACT Act, I think the term, right? It's out there, right? PACT Act, the presumptives. It's all encompassing. So what happens is what the VA is saying is, and I see this one more often than not. High blood pressure comes in for Vietnam era, okay? Diabetes, so high blood pressure, I see that a lot, diabetes, and then a bunch of other stuff. A lot of cancers and things of that nature. Very, very bad things, but unfortunately have occurred. What happens is any of these things, I know you can't see this list, there's about a dozen, few more than a dozen on this list for Vietnam. There's about another dozen or so plus for Gulf War era. So Gulf War era starts from Desert Storm and beyond. Iraq, Afghanistan, it never has closed out. So back from 1990 and beyond. So it's still considered Gulf War era. So you have that list of presumptives. The burn pits you mentioned is essentially the Gulf War era. And then you even have your Camp Lejeune stuff where the Marines were stationed there. Okay. So what happens is veteran comes in with a diagnosis in hand, says, I've got high blood pressure. I was in Vietnam. Perfect. We submit that. The VA looks at that. Again, I don't want to promise what the VA is going to say or doesn't say, but what tends to happen is they look at those two documents, they can put the veteran there in boots in Vietnam or in the waters around Vietnam, 12 nautical miles, and they have high blood pressure. It's presumed they have high blood pressure because they were there. That's the whole spirit behind it. That's the presumptive, the burn pits and so on. So for example, fast forward my era, one of the big ones, chronic rhinitis, has to do with issues with breathing in your nose and all this and that, sinusitis, right? So presume you have the diagnosis in hand by that private doctor. Private doctor says, oh yeah, you got rhinitis. Perfect. Go submit that through us, free of charge, obviously, to the VA. VA then says, oh, yep, I see it. They will still tend to send you to the third-party examiner only because they want to see how bad is it. Although you got the diagnosis, might have been a couple of years ago, or let's say folks that are on high blood pressure medication now from Vietnam era, they've had it for a while. Now they just want to see what the third-party examiner says, well, how bad it is. Because then that's how they rate you accordingly. Basically, they could rate you higher. They might keep it the same, 0%. Or maybe they say, no, it's absolute diagnosis, but it's so bad, we're going to give them 40%. Does that make sense? So I think what you asked is that they tend not to service connect them, or it's harder to service connect them? Is that kind of, yeah, okay. Right. Gotcha, okay. So now with this PACT Act, it's kind of reversed that. And this went through, this past summer was a year. So this PACT Act got signed, what is that, 22? It was around June or July of 22 is when that got signed in. And so that's how that works now. Yes, ma'am. Okay. Yeah. Absolutely. So let me go grab my brochure so I can say the number. Yeah, so if you'd like to make an appointment, yes, ma'am. Sure. Honestly, we'll help navigate it. Really, it's just a matter of us also giving them some helpful information, but we don't process those sorts of things. GI Bill and all that, that goes through the school. So they actually they have to have, an acceptance, and then the counselors over there, they're the ones who process the GI Bill. And so, I mean, that's really as far as that goes. The apprenticeship programs and all that, that's also through, like, we have the numbers, we just basically relay that information to them. But those are things we don't. We process the claims. So you can get a hold of us at 517-546-6338 is our office number. We're all located next to Secretary of State over on Grand River, so you can always walk in as well. Take a tour of the facility. We can get deeper into some of these benefits. Make an appointment if you feel the need. You can also follow us on Facebook or Instagram if you're into that. It's at LivCoVets, so Live LIV CO Vets VETS at LivCoVets. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram that way. Our county website is milivcounty.gov. So it's MI like Michigan, LIV, first part of Livingston County, essentially, and county.gov. So again, milivcounty.gov/veterans. But probably the easiest thing to do is just come by the office or call us, 546-6338. We don't register them in our office. I'm sure we can do just about anything. I guess I could learn how to do it. I mean, never say never, right? I don't know what it encompasses. I get somebody to go, but educate me on that, and we can potentially see what we can do. Oh, good. Good to hear. Good to hear. Yeah. I get that a lot. And going back to my staffing, I don't have enough for volunteers to do. So I don't look. We had a 5K run a couple Saturdays ago in remembrance of 9/11. It was on the 16th of September. And I had like volunteers for that. I had on the upwards of 50-55 we asked for, and they showed up. But things like that, those one-offs, if we have like a bigger event. As far as volunteering around the office, like I said, historically our drivers. But aside from that, I don't really have that opportunity. But it doesn't ever hurt to ask. I mean, you just never know. Sometimes we can make something. Currently, I don't. All right. Thank you.